So what I've done here is, this is Yoshi. It's been about 2 months since she laid her last clutch. So she should be somewhat receptive right now. And that is DK. He is my big male black dragon. He's about 7 feet long. And he is a man, so he is obviously always receptive. But every time I introduce these animals to each other, even though they've bred many, many times, you always want to watch them and make sure to kind of keep any aggression out of the situation. As soon as any aggression is felt, he could end up going after her or vice versa, and it becomes violent, and then there's a ton of damage that can get done really quick with water monitors, and you're basically starting back over. You have to pull the female back out for probably a few days to a week and start over. One of the big things you're going to want to do as well is have something ready to be able to separate these guys, because you don't know what's going on in their heads. He may be having a bad day, or maybe he's a little territorial, but make sure you have everything ready to be able to separate if you see aggression, because by the time you see something and then you run away from the enclosure to grab gloves or to grab tongs, who knows what can happen by then, and then you're off to the vet with a very hurt female, number one. Number two, if she does end up with major injuries, which is absolutely possible, you're not going to be able to breed her for probably a few weeks. So then you're going to miss your window. So you need to be really proactive about this stuff. The other thing to do is I stand in the enclosure when I introduce the animals, even though this guy is not a happy camper. Because at least my presence tends to keep the male off his game. Whereas if I just throw the female in there and walk away, he thinks he's by himself, and there's a really low level of accountability. These animals are not stupid, so they get it. You know, when I'm in the enclosure, they're a little more standoffish. They tend to keep to themselves a little bit more and worry about themselves more. So I always stand in here, and as you can see, she's moving towards the heat area, and he's just kind of watching from above. But if he was really going to go crazy on her, he would have done it by now. He would have charged her as soon as I put her in there. But usually what happens is if the female is aggressive or not receptive, then it sparks the male to kind of go into a self-defense mode. And then it's all bets are off at that point. So he knows that I'm in here. He's coming down right now. He's probably going to come down into the pond. And then usually he'll like peek his face up over the pond and take a look at her, which is what he's probably going to end up doing. But he'll be taking an eye, peeking around at me as well the entire time to make sure he knows where I'm at and what I'm doing, which is exactly what I want. I want him to be knowledgeable and to be aware that I am in this cage, and that, you know, if anything happens, I'm going to have to jump in there and grab him. I'm not wearing gloves because I know Yoshi is not aggressive. So generally, if the male goes after her, I really only have to deal with one animal. That's why I'm not wearing gloves, which is why I have the tongs. If I was, say, introducing DK to Balerion, since she started breeding, she's got a little more defensive. So I would definitely be wearing gloves because I might have to grab both of them at the same time. This is also another thing you need to consider, is that, you know, DK is gigantic and he's super strong. And I'm a big guy, I'm 6'2", 215, so, I mean, I can handle him enough to be able to maintain safety for her. But if I have two large monitors that don't get along and I put them together, chances are I'll need help. So you need to make sure you have something available, or at least maybe somebody in the garage that's not, you know, that maybe not experienced with handling monitors, but can at least grab stuff and throw them to you, or manipulate a tail out of the way or whatever, you know. So those are just a few things you need to keep in mind with putting the monitors together. After you've introduced them, like even right now, it'd probably be safe to walk away, because I know at this point he hasn't gone nuts and attacked her. She knows when she's in this cage that she's going to be breeding. This is her main breeding cage, and she's bred for many, many, many years. Not in this cage, but she's bred many, many years for us. So at this point, I think that anything violent that would have happened by now. So it would be okay for me to walk away. However, I always set this stuff up to where I'm putting her in with him. It's early in the morning. They have the whole day to acclimate together, and I'm going to be feeding them in a few hours, and I actually have to dig up a clutch of eggs from a black dragon that's right next door. So I'm going to be in here, out, around and about, and kind of disrupting anything that might be going on. They're going to be wondering what I'm doing the entire time as well. So make sure you plan ahead. Don't put these in together right before you have to go to a doctor's appointment or something. You need to have an entire day to sit around and make sure that everything's good and everybody's working out together. If you put two animals together and they're fighting, you know, it's not always a good thing. Some breeders, you know, they're okay with the male and female combating, and that works for them sometimes. I mean, it's not, I don't know. It's nothing that I don't do any of that. I mean, just straight up, I don't do any of that. If my animals don't get along, I know that my timing is off, and I'll pull them out. And that's how I figure out a lot of my timing. Because generally the females, if they're in a bad mood, it's usually because they're not receptive. And my male doesn't care. I mean, he's a male, so he'll breed anything. It doesn't matter. So you need to make sure you get your timing okay and that you're good to go. And then you should be fine. And then obviously I watch on the cameras for my lockups. And I'll come down here when they do lock up and make sure we have an actual lockup. And then we can move on from there. But generally I'll leave the female in this enclosure. She'll be breeding in here for probably a week or two, as long as it's not too stressful for her. If it becomes like an issue because DK's always, you know, like trying to get at her and whatnot, and it kind of becomes a pain in the ass for her to stay afloat in the pond when he's trying to breed her in the pond, and she's super old. She's like 16 years old now. So, but those are just a couple little things to keep in mind when you're introducing two monitors together for breeding. And there he is. He's over there now. Right here. Hi, buddy. You're just sitting there watching me. Funny. But yeah. So hopefully they'll breed, and we might end up with a clutch. I doubt it. I've just been breeding her just because I know she lays her eggs anyway. So you might as well shoot for a fertile clutch. But she's so old, her fertility rate's down to a real bare minimum at this point. So we usually only get one really good clutch out of her a year, even though she lays close to 100 eggs every year. So pretty cool. Hopefully this information has been good for you guys, and keep feeding.